Good afternoon. Pardon me. I'm afraid that I have the hiccups. Ah, mm, my apologies. Um, Earlier this morning, Mr. Lucas and Mr. Calaby and I, pardon me, had a little argument concerning Mr. Lucas's motion for a community-based, pardon me, medal, um, uh, to which I had to leave rather prematurely because I had to go to school. My school day starts at 6:40, and he said that I was pulling a Cyprian. Um, Now my school day begins at 6:40 and it ends at 2:10. So I'm afraid that just because I have to leave early in a debate does not mean that I'm shrugging away from that debate. In fact, it's the very same topic that I want to discuss now. This idea to me is very, very strange, and it's somewhat alarming because um, it will set up, if it's set in place, a community-based medal system. And what this will do is the administrators, primarily Mr. Lucas, has nominated a few people to sit on this college that will nominate and seemingly elect people to this medal. Um, First of all, administrators are meant to be somewhat judges and executives. They carry out policy concerning the community. And they're supposed to be, they're meant to be, they ought to be, and they really should be impartial. And saying that they have the right to then uh, uh, nominate and elect people to become recipients of a medal is rather not impartial. It's very partial, in fact. Uh, uh, Also, uh, I mean, judges would be impartial in a trial. So why why are these people not going to be impartial? I mean, you've nominated them with no democratic means from this community, and they're rather selecting people. And how do I know, first of all, that this is not just a popularity contest? I mean, I don't believe that Cyprian is going to receive uh, any vote or he's going to receive any medal, but that doesn't mean that uh, him or James Pekowski aren't the same, aren't as respected. I respect them both. Now, of course, there are issues with Mr. Cyprian, um, just because his government is a bit elusive. Um, but also, the primary issue that I have is not only that administrators are going to be impartial, and that this is a big issue for me, is that not only are administrators going to be impartial, but also um, it's going to be a merit system. It's going to be viewed as, oh, look, he just got awarded this. So why should we just, reward people because of their popularity? We shouldn't. We ought to, and we need to be impartial. All of us. I'm not going to say that the community is itself impartial, but at least the administrators ought to. Um, Also, another issue, and this is because of my vehement hatred towards, not very, uh, uh, not very vehement hatred towards the OAN. But it also is that the Secretary General of the OAN would be entrenched into this college that would elect and select members of the community. Now, This rather reminds me of a macronational situation. In Andorra, the one of the princes there, one of the co-princes, is the president of France. Do I believe that that's democratic? Not at all. Because I'm sure that the Andorrans would just love to know that the French, uh, a president that they have no means to elect, no ability to elect, no rights to elect, is indeed one of their co-princes. That I find very elusive. Um, Also, the president of France never visits Andorra, at least to my knowledge. Um, also, uh, and how do we know that this this banner, this medal, will not be simply for merit? I mean, let's be honest. People like to support their friends. I'll be honest to that. I do that quite frequently if you know how much I support Robert Leffler. Um, but I'm not going to say that I wouldn't vote for Robert Leffler for medal, but the fact that this would just be simply elected by some people in this community don't have higher standings, such as myself, I'm afraid. Um, whilst I may be respected, I don't believe that I'm well liked. That's the same in the real world. Um, but and what basis would keep these medals from being given by nations based on their allies and their preferences, or say giving it to one's friends? I mean, there ought to be some safeguard to make it impartial and to keep on um, being rather free from any merit or any preference. Um, I mean, in the community already, we already have, each of us individually already have medals. We already, award and grant medals, but we give them to our friends already. And it's a sign of alliance, of friendship, of peace. Um, and, I mean, why would we want to or try to usurp that system? Because I believe it's worked very well for us. Just because it makes our governments less corrupt, it makes our community less corrupt, and it also helps us identify who our friends are and who exactly we trust. That's about all that I have now. Of course, I'm sure that as soon as Mr. Lucas um, gets up for the morning, I will attack him for being a Cyprian, for leaving my conversation so soon, because he has to go to school, just I did. Also, I would like to point out that my writing style is a bit um, different, in case you haven't noticed. Um, for instance, you might notice that I put an M and a period before someone's last name. That isn't an initial, that isn't some strange abbreviation for Mr. Rather, it's an abbreviation for Monsieur. And in case you've been an ally with Sandus, or have known me, or a member of Sandus, for uh, the past 2 years, you would most likely have noticed that I have always spelled Monsieur. I've never, or rarely, used Mr., but I always use Monsieur, not only because it's less work to put in that extra R, even though it's not that much work, but it's also, I believe, more formal, and it identifies with Sandus much better. However, I'm afraid that I'm going to have to go. I believe I have more work to get done in means of homework and micronationalism, of course. Our Constitution should be out in just a few days. From then, it will go to national referendum, and then it will come into effect. Elections, I'm sure, will be within the following days after the Constitution is passed, and that should be all good. And hopefully, should the people of Sandus will it, I will be the people's president. Anyway, um, thank you, and good evening.